Emerson. Just call me Gigi. And for everybody else, I'm Susan Walker. I'm an artist. This is my studio in Issaquah, Washington. And years ago, and we're talking 30 years ago, I was a first grade teacher. And I wanted to share some of those skills with Emerson as he's learning to read. He's a kindergartner, so join us if you can. Thank you. See you soon. Hi, everybody. Just call me Gigi. Hi, Emerson. Hi, Taylor and Parker. Hi, Olivia and Finn. Hi, Maddie. Hi, Miles. Hi, Abby. Hi, Izzy. Hi, Jacob. Hi, Evan. Hi, Remy. Hi, Max. Hi, Nico. Hi, Gus. Hi, Riley. Okay, my friends. Today we're going to continue our work with blends, also called digraphs. And I talked to my friend who's a kindergarten teacher, and she said that blends are when two letters like S and T come together and squish into one sound. You can still hear the S and the T. St. And a digraph is actually where two letters come together and make one sound. And we haven't really studied those yet. That would be like ch and sh and f. But we'll get to that. It's not really important that you know the difference between a digraph and a blend, but it was just really bugging me as a teacher not to know the difference between. So I'm really appreciative to Miss Andrews for clearing that up for me. So about our blends today, the ones that we've reviewed so far have been ST, st, like in the word stone, FL, full, like flag, TR, tur, as in truck, and also in truck, but at the end of the word, CK, which goes k, truck. And I also wanted to explain today about William Steig, because he's the author of the two books I'm going to be reading today, and why his name would start with an uppercase or a capital S. So here's how this works. Here's the word stone. Here's the word still, like it was a still night. It was very quiet. And suddenly we see a giant large S at the beginning of William Steig's name. And that's because you use an uppercase or a capital letter when it's the name of a person. Like Emerson, your name starts with a capital E. And Max, your name would start with a capital M. And Evan, your name would start with a capital E, like Emerson's does. The other time that we use an uppercase or a capital letter is when it's at the very first word, the very first letter of the first word in a sentence. So here's a sentence. Still, the dog ran fast. That's my sentence. Still, comma, the dog ran fast. So still is the first word in that sentence, and it has a capital S, or an uppercase S. And you know what comes at the end of a sentence, right? A period, a dot. Tells you as the reader to stop, take a breath, and begin the next sentence. All right, let's get on to our William Steig books. And I'm going to finish reading one of them, and then I'm going to point out some of the interesting vocabulary words he uses, and how, as a reader, even if you've never heard of the word before, you can kind of figure out what it means either by looking at the pictures or by reading the words on either side and kind of trying to understand what's going on in the story. Okay, let's begin. we get to read. Okay, friends, here's our book, Caleb and Kate by William Steig. Caleb and Kate, written and illustrated by William Steig. There's the ST. Caleb the carpenter and Kate the weaver loved each other, but not every single minute. Once in a while they differ about this or that and wind up in such a fierce quarrel you'd never believe they were husband and wife. During one of those crazy quarrels, Caleb got so angry he slammed out of the house, hating his wife from top to bottom, and she, for her part, screamed after him the most odious insults that came to her mouth. Caleb went crashing into the forest by their house, pondering why he had married such a cantankerous hotty-dotty. But after he'd walked a while, his fury faded, and he couldn't remember what it was they quarreled about. He could only remember that he loved her. He could only remember her dimples and her sweet ways, and what fragrant noodle pudding she made. Instead of going straight back home to put his arms around her and kiss her warm neck, he decided, since he was already there, to look in the forest for oak trees he could cut down later and take to the mill. He wandered farther and farther into the woods, grew leg-weary, and lying down to rest just for a moment, was overcome with all the greenness and slipped into a green sleep. Before long, the witch Edida, who lived in a hidden cave in that forest, came shuffling by in her slippers, saying secret spells to herself. She stopped short where Caleb was lying, snoring away like a beehive. How timely, she snickered. Here's my chance to test that new spell that cousin Yggdrasil just taught me. Squatting down, she touched her skinny thumb to the tip of Caleb's left forefinger and, careful not to wake him, barely wheezed these words. Ammy whammy, ibn bammy, this is now a bow wow wow. And there at her feet, instead of a snoring carpenter, was a snoozing dog. Oh, what a darling spell, she crowed. And pleased to have worked her day's worth of mischief, the witch departed, swollen with pride. It was sundown when Caleb awoke. First he yawned, and then he stretched, and then he reached to scratch his armpit. With his leg, holy gazzoli, his eyes bulged, and his big mouth hung open and slavered. Where he should have seen a belt and pants and a pair of heavy boots, he beheld the belly and hairy legs of a dog. He was on his feet in an instant, all four of them. Terrified, he spun around to see what he could see himself. He couldn't believe what he saw. Of course not. Such things don't happen. Oh no, this is clearly me, he realized. I'm not dreaming. I'm a dog. Now what, he wondered. Well, all I can do is go back home and explain what happened. And he began trotting homeward, stunned by his new condition, his tail swinging from side to side. Whatever in the world of wonders was it all about? He was suddenly a dog. True, but he was also Caleb the carpenter. He had Caleb's thoughts, and he was running home to his wife, Kate, wasn't he? Yes, on four legs and sick at heart. Night fell, and there was a simple moon. Kate, at home, was stumbling from room to room, bumping into furniture, dizzy with dread. She had been at every window again and again, peering out, and had been outside many times, but had seen no part of Caleb. Had her husband deserted her? She asked herself. No, he loved her. He had said that so often. But maybe he was fed up with her. Or maybe something had happened to him, a catastrophe. Caleb was outside the door just then, reluctant to come in and show himself. He was ashamed of being a dog, but at last he worked up the courage to scratch. When Kate held the door open and he saw her pale, worried face, he scrambled over the doorsill, thrust his hairy paws up into her apron, and strove to say, "Katie, it's me." Only a severing growl escaped his throat. He tried again and again. He could imagine himself saying, "Kate," but he couldn't say it. "Oh, you poor lost animal," she cried. She gave him some water in a bowl on the floor and a piece of leftover ham. Caleb drank avidly, but he had no heart to eat. When Kate put on a shawl on her shoulders and started to leave, he knew she was going out to look for him, and he tried to stop her. He held her shoe in his teeth. "Oh, stand aside, silly dog," she scolded. "This is no time for games. I must find my dear husband. He may be in terrible trouble." Caleb let her go and trotted gravely after her. All night they trampled through the moon-laced forest. There was no finding Caleb, because there he was behind his wife with the shape and shadow of a dog. At home again in the cool morning, her shoes wet with dew, weary Kate fell asleep in the chair Caleb had made for her, and the maker at her feet slept. When they awoke at noon, Kate searched again in the forest, with the woebegone Caleb dogging her heels, sniffing the ground for no good reason except he felt he had to. Then she went into town and made inquiries there, in the tavern, at the post office, in the shops, on the green. Everyone was deeply concerned and would keep an eye out, but no one had caught even a glimpse of Caleb, coming or going or standing still. Kate went to bed that night, and Caleb got into his rightful place, snuggled beside her, kissed her sweet neck as he had always done, and sighed out his sorrows. She welcomed the dog's warmth. With him there, she felt less bereft. She fell asleep with her arm around him, but he was awake all night, wide-eyed and wondering. How could he manage to make himself known to his wife? If he could only tell her somehow that the dog in her arms was her husband. If he could only return to his natural state. Or if Kate could possibly become a dog, then they could be dogs together. Kate decided to keep Caleb. She bought him a collar studded with brass and named him Rufus because his fur was reddish, like her husband's hair. She taught him tricks, to stand on two legs, to sit, to shake hands, to fetch things that she asked for, to count by barking, to bow. She could hardly believe how fast he learned. Whenever their friends came over to visit, Kate would show off her dog. He enjoyed these gatherings, the human conversation, but he didn't like to have his head patted by his old friends. Kate grew to love her dog, very much indeed. But though they gave each other comfort, they were far from happy. Kate longed for her missing husband. She couldn't understand why he'd left her, and how Caleb wished he could speak and explain. He would sprawl by her feet, gnawing a bone, while she worked at her weaving. Often, a tear would hang from her lashes, or she would stare through the window and sigh. Caleb would put his paws in her lap and lick her sad face. Kate would scratch fondly behind his ears, caress his fur, and tell him how lucky she was to have such a faithful friend. One afternoon in late summer, when Caleb was stretched under a tree, reveling in the green smell of the grass, some other dogs turned up and enticed him into a romp. Caleb loved it, but soon quit and retired into the house, where the other dogs dared not follow. He had discovered that being a dog among dogs could be joyous, but he didn't want to forget who he was. The dogs came by a few times more, but Caleb gave them no encouragement, and they stopped coming. Months passed in their proper order. From time to time, Caleb was drawn back to the place where he'd turned into a dog. He hoped he might find in that luckless spot some clue to the secret of his transformation. He would lie down where he had fallen asleep that day, pretend to be sleeping again, and watch intently through slitted eyes. Chipmunks scurried about in sudden darts. Birds were busy in their branches. Leaves bent with the roving breezes. A legion of insects hummed. Grasshoppers, on occasion, catapulted through the air. Caleb saw nothing extraordinary. He tried chewing various plants on the wild chance that one of them might change him back to a man, but no such thing even began to happen. Winter came, the snow fell. It was 8 months since Caleb had become a dog. He kept warm near the glowing fireplace, dozing much of the day. He watched Kate move through the house, hopeless now about ever being able to reveal his true self. And what if she did learn who he was? Would it make her happier? Well, she would know that he hadn't deserted her. But would she relish having a dog for a husband? He decided she wouldn't like that. One crisp, starry night, long after Christmas, burglars crept up into the warm, sleeping house. They carefully pried open a window and snuck into the parlor with a drift of icy air. But Caleb was instantly up and barking. He scurried through the bedroom door straight at the intruders. "Ah, fry this stupid mutt!" cried the shorter burglar, trying to fend him off. Caleb locked his jaws on the man's arm. The taller burglar seized Caleb by the collar, but Caleb held on fast. Kate, torn from her dreams by the hubbub, saw her brave dog fighting 2 men and ran to help. She pummeled the one who had hold of Caleb and pulled his coarse hair. He wheeled and flung her to the floor, hissing broken curses through his beard. That very instant, Caleb rushed him, hoarsely snarling and showing his dangerous fangs. The terrified thief drew a knife from a pocket in his rags and slashed crazily at Caleb, slicing a bit of skin, off a toe on his front paw. A miracle. Caleb didn't yelp with pain. He yelled the word ouch, and holding his injured paw to his mouth, he was astonished to find it was a bleeding hand. The thief had cut the toe that had been the finger through which the witch Yaida had worked her magic spell, and the spell was broken. Caleb was Caleb again, still clad in his old clothes. "It's me!" he shouted excitedly. Kate gasped, and then, "Caleb!" she shrieked. The thieves, frightened to the point of insanity, dived through the window and vanished. They ran so fast they left no footprints in the snow. Caleb and Kate leapt into each other's arms and cleaved together for a long time. Much later, when they were able to talk intelligently, Caleb told her, or tried to tell her, what had happened. As far as he knew, what had actually happened, they never found out. Like many another thing, it remained a mystery. The end. Okay, friends, I want to go back to this page, which is one of the most exciting pages in the whole story. And this is the word, she pummeled the one who had hold of Caleb. So I'm going to read the sentence before that and the sentence after it, and then you can kind of guess what you think the word pummeled meant. Kate, torn from her dreams by the hubbub, saw her brave dog fighting two men and ran to help. She pummeled the one who had hold of Caleb and pulled his coarse hair. He wheeled around and flung her to the floor. So what do you think the word pummeled means? You can just kind of guess at it. But these are called context clues. You read kind of around a word you don't know, and it kind of helps you figure out what that word is. Like here's another one. Caleb was outside the door just then, reluctant to come in and show himself. Okay, you might have heard the word reluctant, but what do you think it means? Let's read it again. Caleb was outside the door just then, reluctant to come in and show himself. He was ashamed of being a dog. So I'm thinking that reluctant means kind of shy and afraid to come in the house. So those are just examples of the great vocabulary that William Steig uses in his books. All right, let me get ready to read the second book to you. This one is titled Sylvester and the Magic Pebble by William Steig. You can see there's an uppercase or large S starting the title of this story, just like there's an uppercase S here, because that's the name. That's the man's name. This is the name of the book. This is the name of the man. Sylvester Duncan lived with his mother and father at Acorn Road in Oatsdale. One of his hobbies was collecting pebbles of unusual shape and color. So here he is with his pebbles, which are small, smooth rocks, if you don't know what a pebble is. One rainy Saturday afternoon during vacation, he found a quite extraordinary pebble. It was flaming red, shiny, perfectly round, like a marble. As he was studying this remarkable pebble, he began to shiver, probably from excitement and the rain, which felt cold on his back. "Ah, I wish it would stop raining," he said. To his great surprise, the rain stopped. It just didn't stop gradually as rains usually do. It ceased. The drops vanished on the way down. The clouds disappeared, and everything was dry and the sun was shining as if rain had never existed. In all his young life, Sylvester had never had a wish gratified so quickly. It struck him that magic must be at work, and he guessed that the magic must be in the remarkable-looking red pebble, where it indeed was. To make a test, he put the pebble on the ground and said, "I wish it would rain again." Nothing happened. But when he said the same thing when he was holding the pebble in his hoof, the sky turned black, there was lightning and a clap of thunder, and rain came shooting down. Well, what a lucky day this is, thought Sylvester. From now on, I can have anything I want. My father and mother can have anything they want. My relatives, my friends, anybody at all can have everything anybody wants. He wished the sunshine back in the sky, and then he wished that a wart that he had on his left hind fetlock would disappear, and it did. And he started home, eager to amaze his father and mother with his magic pebble. He could hardly wait to see their faces. Maybe they wouldn't even believe him at first. As he was crossing Strawberry Hill, thinking of some of the many, many things he could wish for, he was startled to see a mean, hungry lion looking right at him from behind some tall grass. He was frightened. If he hadn't been so frightened, he could have made the lion disappear. Or he could have wished himself safe at home with his father and mother. He could have wished that the lion would turn into a butterfly or a daisy or a bug. He could have wished many things, but he panicked and he couldn't think carefully. "I wish I were a rock," he said, and he became a rock. The lion came bounding over, sniffing the rock 100 times, walking around and around it, and went away confused, perplexed, puzzled, bewildered. "I saw that little donkey clear as day. Maybe I'm going crazy," he muttered. And there was Sylvester, a rock on Strawberry Hill, with the magic pebble lying right beside him on the ground, and he was unable to pick it up. "Oh, how I wish I were myself again," he thought. But nothing happened. He had to be touching the pebble to make the magic work. There was nothing he could do about it. His thoughts began to race like mad. He was scared and worried. Being helpless, he felt hopeless. He imagined all the possibilities, and he eventually realized that his only chance of becoming himself again was for someone to find the red pebble and wish that the red rock next to it would be a donkey. Someone would surely find the red pebble. It was so bright and shiny. But what on earth would make them wish that a rock were a donkey? The chance was 1 in a billion at best. Sylvester fell asleep. What else could he do? Night came on with many stars. Meanwhile, back at home, Mr. and Mrs. Duncan paced the floor, frantic with worry. Sylvester had never come home later than dinner time. Where could he be? They stayed up all night wondering what had happened, expecting that Sylvester would surely turn up by morning. But he didn't, of course. Mrs. Duncan cried a lot, and Mr. Duncan did his best to soothe her. Both longed to have their dear son with them. "I will never scold Sylvester again as long as I live," said Mrs. Duncan, "no matter what he does." At dawn, they went about inquiring of all the neighbors. They talked to all the children, the puppies, the kittens, the colts, the piglets. No one had seen Sylvester since the day before yesterday. They went to the police. The police could not find their child. All the dogs in Oatsdale went searching for him. They sniffed behind every rock and tree and blade of grass and into every nook and gully of the neighborhood and beyond, but found not a scent of him. They sniffed the rock on Strawberry Hill, but it smelled like a rock. It didn't smell like Sylvester. After a month of searching the same places over and over again and inquiring of the same animals over and over again, Mr. and Mrs. Duncan no longer knew what to do. They concluded that something dreadful must have happened and they would probably never see their son again, though all the time he was less than a mile away. They tried their best to be happy, to go about their usual ways, but their usual ways included Sylvester, and they were always reminded of him. They were miserable. Life had no meaning for them anymore. Night followed day, day followed night, over and over again. Sylvester on the hill woke up less and less often. When he was awake, he was only hopeless and unhappy. He felt he would be a rock forever, and he tried to get used to it. He went into an endless sleep. The days grew colder. Fall came with the leaves changing color. Then the leaves fell, and the grass bent to the ground. It was winter. The winds blew this way and that. It snowed. Mostly the animals stayed indoors, living on the food they had stored up. One day, a wolf sat on the rock that was Sylvester and howled because he was hungry. Then the snows melted, the earth warmed up in the spring sun, and things budded. Leaves were on the trees again. Flowers showed their young faces. One day in May, Mr. Duncan insisted that his wife go with him on a picnic. "Let's cheer up," he said. "Let us try to live again and be happy, even though Sylvester, our angel, is no longer with us." So they went to Strawberry Hill. Mrs. Duncan sat down on the rock. The warmth of his own mother sitting on him woke Sylvester up from his deep winter sleep. How he wanted to shout, "Mother, Father, it's me, Sylvester, I'm right here." But he couldn't talk. He had no voice. He was stone dumb. Mr. Duncan walked aimlessly about while Mrs. Duncan set out the picnic food on the rock. Alfalfa sandwiches, pickled oats, sassafras salad, timothy compote. Suddenly, Mr. Duncan saw the red pebble. "Oh, what a fantastic pebble!" he exclaimed. Sylvester would have loved it for his collection, and he put the pebble on the rock. They sat down to eat. Sylvester was now as wide awake as a donkey that was a rock could possibly be. Mrs. Duncan felt some mysterious excitement. "You know, Father," she said suddenly, "I have the strangest feeling that our dear Sylvester is still alive and not far away." I am, Sylvester wanted to shout, but he couldn't. If only he had realized that the pebble resting on his back was the magic pebble. "Oh, how I wish he were here with us on this lovely May day," said Mrs. Duncan. Mr. Duncan looked sadly at the ground. "Don't you wish it too, Father?" she said. He looked at her as if to say, "How can you ask me such a question?" Mr. and Mrs. Duncan looked at each other with great sorrow. Oh, I wish I were myself again. I wish I were my real self again, thought Sylvester. And in less than an instant, he was. You can imagine the scene that followed, the embraces, the kisses, the questions, the answers, the loving looks, the fond exclamations. When they had eventually calmed down a bit and had gotten home, Mr. Duncan put the magic pebble in an iron safe. Someday they may want to use it, but really for now, what more could they wish for? They had all that they wanted. The end. And again, just exploring words we might not have heard of. Here's the word inquiring. So Sylvester hasn't come home. So at dawn, they were inquiring of all the neighbors. And you can see from the picture that Mrs. Duncan is talking to this neighbor, who's a pig, and Mr. Duncan is talking to these neighbors who look like they're chickens. So I would say at dawn they went about inquiring of all the neighbors, means asking basically, have you seen Sylvester? So inquiring probably means something like asking. That would be my guess from the context clues. See if I can find another one. Here's one. Here's another word, dreadful. So they're at home, they've gone to look, they've looked and looked, and they realize they probably, you can see by their sadness. So here's the word dreadful. Mr. and Mrs. Duncan no longer knew what to do. They concluded that something dreadful must have happened, and they would probably never see their son again. So I would say dreadful here kind of means awful. Something awful must have happened. Something horrific must have happened, because it says they figured they would probably never see their son again. So I would say that's what dreadful means, because I'm using the pictures and the context cues to kind of help me understand that word. Friends, that is it. I just sneezed. Glad that wasn't on camera. Okay, just to review today, we talked about the difference between blends and digraphs, where two letters smushed together to make a sound. You don't need to worry too much whether you call it a blend or a digraph. Just know that two letters next to each other smush and make a sound. So we looked at the word stone, still, Stieg, which is the author's name. And we talked about how the uppercase capital S is because it's his name. It's a proper name, like Sylvester and the magic pebble started with a capital, uppercase S, because it's the name of a book. And then I showed you this sentence, still the dog ran fast, period. Still is the first word in that sentence, and that's why it has an uppercase S to start that. So that's a review. And next week, I wanted to let you know we're going to be reading some books about rhyming words. Probably going to read you one of Izzy and my favorite books. It's very short. I was walking down the road, but it's got rhyming words, road, toad. So that's a fun one. Then a much more complicated one, I'm either going to read this one, which is Kermit the Hermit by the author William Peet. And the pictures look like this. The end of each of his phrases has a rhyming word, which is an incredible challenge for him. The other one that also has rhyming words is this first Madeline book. So we might read that one too. I haven't decided yet, but it'll be good reading no matter what. So thank you again for your attention, for your time today, for your good hard work at learning how to read and enjoying these books with me. I absolutely love reading these books out loud to you. Okay, my friends, see you next time. Bye-bye.